I'm a marketing guy, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is Professor C.S. Lau. Now, you are a professor at the Hong Kong University School of Medicine.
Yes, Michael.
You're also the convener of a advisory panel on vaccines for the government, right?
Exactly, yes.
Now, there have been a new cluster of people getting sick from the virus. This is the gym cluster, and there have been several lockdowns and so on. I think over 100 people got infected from this cluster. Are we in a fifth wave?
I certainly hope not, but obviously this gym cluster is a very unfortunate one. Just as we were thinking that, in fact, the condition has been really quite quiescent and we haven't had many new cases, we see this gym cluster. Hopefully, with, of course, people knowing about the virus better and availability for testing for the virus, as well as the government's actions on, lockdowning certain blocks or certain parts of the streets or certain area of Hong Kong, that we will be able to catch, those potentially infected ones.
We're not in the fifth wave. Some people say we are in the fifth wave, but the fourth wave never even ended.
That's
because
right.
We never reached zero, right? So the fourth wave was still going on, and then now suddenly you've got this big eruption, a new one at the gym. So are we in between the fourth and the fifth wave?
I would, but as I said, it depends on how we define a wave, right? And as you mentioned, the fourth wave hasn't even finished. We only had a few days when we had no reported cases in Hong Kong, and then we had a few previously, those from the K11 museum, and then now the gym cluster. So in a way, the infection, the epidemic is still with us. I think that's the most important thing. Whether it's the fifth or sixth or seventh wave,
it doesn't really matter, right?
Yes, it's still with us.
Now, Professor Gabriel Leung, also from HKU, he's the dean there, and he said a few days back that we're now at a very crucial stage. If we don't control this gym cluster, right, then we really could be in trouble. Other professors have told me that we could reach a point where we will see 100 cases a day. Do you think that could happen?
Now, thank God it hasn't happened yet, okay? But really, I hope, the viewers of the program now take note that this is potentially very serious. And any of those people who have been in contact with potential gym clusters, people, please go and get yourself tested. And any of the close contacts, please go and let the authority know that maybe you need to be quarantined so that we get you isolated from the rest of the Hong Kong. And hopefully with all these, in place, that the spread will be contained over the next few days.
In the case of the Yau Ma Tei area, where there were a lot of ethnic minorities, they locked it down for 2 days, right?
Yes.
And then they tested everybody. So that was controlled quite effectively. In the case of the gym, you have a lot of these wealthy people, expatriates and so on, and they had gone everywhere. They'd gone to bars and restaurants, and there are a lot of bankers there, and they socialized. And how do you then, you say to tell the viewers to take it very seriously, but, these people went to so many different places. How do you do contact tracing?
Well, I think obviously we will need our colleagues from the Department of Health to interview everyone who might have, got in touch or in contact with an infected person previously, and then be as widespread as possible in terms of locking down, in terms of quarantining the potential contacts. And of course, I would think that many of the potentially infected people from the gym clusters, they will have a lot more, access to news, to information, etc. And if every one of us or every one of them actually will fulfill the citizens' obligation and responsibility and report as soon as possible, as soon as they feel that they may be at risk, get tested, isolate oneself, that will hopefully contain the...
Okay, now, every time there is a new wave, the government will say, all right, let's shut down some of the restaurants and you can only open until 2 p.m. And then it was increased to 6 p.m. and then it was then increased to 10 p.m. Do you see that coming now, shutting down gyms? Because some people say shut down all the gyms. I mean, is that a good idea?
But obviously, when I am not on the panel of sort of advisors.
But as an
on
expert,
this,
what do you think?
I think everyone will just have to be sensible. Everyone will have to make sure that they keep the mask on, keep their hand hygienic, and keep the social distance. That's the most important thing.
How do you do gym, strenuous exercise and keep your mask on? It's very difficult.
Of course, yes. Then maybe, the instructors or whoever goes to the gym will have to modify and moderate, the level of physical activity within the gym.
Now, you are the convener of the panel that advises the government on vaccines. So I'll ask you about vaccines. After about 6 or 7 people died taking the Sinovac vaccine, there was a lower number of people willing to take a shot, right? And so now, after so many weeks of people allowed to take shots, we've got around 200,000 people out of 7.5 million people who've taken shots. At this rate, it'll take years for everybody in Hong Kong to get tested, right?
Exactly.
What can we do?
I think it is really upon people like, first of all, the government, of course, to educate the people of Hong Kong the need for the vaccines. Look, I think if we remember 1 year ago when WHO declared COVID-19 as a pandemic, I remember it was on the 11th of March, we were talking about 118,000 of people infected by the virus and 4,000 odd deaths. 1 year on, last week, when I looked at the data, we're talking about 118 million plus people infected with COVID.
This is worldwide.
This is worldwide, and 2.6 million worldwide deaths. So this is a major infection that we have to deal with. And Hong Kong is not isolated from the rest of the world. And in the past 1 year or so, we have over 11,000 people who had got infected by the virus. We had over 200 people who had died. So, and there are a lot of other impacts that this virus or infection has on us. On the economy, I'm sure you interviewed the relevant people in the last few weeks or so.
Sure.
On the economy, as well as even if we come back to health, there was some data on what we call excess mortality recorded last year. For example, if you look at the percentage or the number of people who died during different parts of the year last year, and compare that with the number of people who died on average in the previous 5 years. In May and June, I should say, as well in September, we were seeing an excess of 20% of mortality in Hong Kong.
It's grown.
It's grown. So it's suggesting that, this virus is not just killing those who got infected. Maybe, for various reasons, other people were affected. I know of a patient who had stomach problem, who was so worried about the COVID situation in the hospital and kept delaying going to the clinic.
And didn't want to go and that hurt him, right?
Eventually, a few months later, he had the scoop, and they found that he had cancer of the stomach. Had he, got the test done a few months earlier, maybe the whole situation could be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you say the government should do more work to convince people to take the shot, but after, a number of people died from the Sinovac vaccine, I want to ask you this: did that vaccine cause the death indirectly? Because some people told me, yes, it's not only because they had underlying diseases or causes, health like diabetes or whatever, but had they not taken the shot, they wouldn't have died. So there is an indirect link or a direct link. I don't know. You're the expert.
I don't think we are able to draw a conclusion yet. I mean, right now, so far, we have only just under 200,000 people who have got vaccinated. The deaths that we have seen so far are primarily related to the heart, coronary, or to the brain, the stroke. We've got to know that every day in Hong Kong, we have a lot of people who got diagnosed with stroke and coronary. And some of these people do die. Say, for example, according
But if they'd not taken the shot, maybe they wouldn't have died. It was anxiety, a complication arose because of the shot.
Now, for that, I cannot totally exclude that possibility. But then, of course, if someone has got such unstable or high risk for either the coronary or stroke, presumably other sort of stimulations can also potentially trigger this outcome. So I think the important thing is when we look at these mortality data, or indeed any so-called adverse event data, we need to compare it with the background data, see whether there is an increase over time.
So, okay, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back to this soon. See you soon. Thanks for with us. This is Straight Talk. With me is Professor C.S. Lau, professor here with the Hong Kong University School of Medicine, also the convener of an advisory panel on vaccines for the government. Now we're talking about whether this Sinovac vaccine caused these deaths directly or indirectly. You said that there's not enough data to determine this, right? Because only about 200,000 people have been vaccinated so far. So, but that is what is driving people's fear.
Yes.
So let's try and calm some of those fears down. Let me just ask you, have you taken a vaccine shot?
I have myself last week.
And, there is a choice of BioNTech or the Sinovac. Some people I asked said they took the Sinovac, others said they took the BioNTech. May I ask which one you took?
Oh, well, if I have to declare, then first of all, I have a contraindication for Sinovac. And therefore, when I took the vaccine, it was the BioNTech one.
Okay, so it was a BioNTech one.
Yes.
All right. So you've got to take another shot soon, right?
Yes.
Okay, but do you advise people now to take the Sinovac one, or should that be stopped for the time being until the investigations are complete?
No, I don't think we have enough data, to conclude that Sinovac has caused the various deaths that have been reported so far. What I think is important is perhaps we should allow people the clarity of the situation by providing people the data, the more or less up-to-date every day, how many people have received the vaccines, how many people have reported certain side effects, and how many people have died. And then compared, with what we have observed over the last year, same time last year, or the year before, or the year before, etc. So that people will have a better idea of whether some of these events are truly related to the vaccine.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering, a couple of things people have also asked about. We use the BioNTech vaccine, for example. We vaccinate 5 people, right? But some countries use that same vial and vaccinate 6 people.
Yes.
But we are only vaccinating 5 and throwing the rest away. And if we don't have enough vaccines now, why don't we maximize the use of these vaccines and do 6 shots rather than 5?
In fact, you're right about maximizing the use of these vaccines. In fact, in one of these vials, if we dilute it, it is possible that we can make it up to 6 doses for 6 people. And this is what some other countries are doing to maximize the availability of these vaccines to
Why aren't we
the
doing
population. In Hong Kong, of course, it is the manufacturer of the vaccine who indeed recommends to only use each vial of the vaccine to be diluted into 5 doses for 5 people's use.
So, but if you look at countries like Israel and the United States. Israel has vaccinated almost its entire population. In the U.S. now, I think they've vaccinated about 20% of their
Yes,
population.
correct.
Over 60 million. They're doing 3 million a day now.
Yes.
So they're maximizing their use. But in Hong Kong, we have to follow what the manufacturer says.
In a way, that's what we're doing now.
Okay. Now, there's also another question that arises. Before I ask that, I want to ask you, now the government is lowering the age of those who can take, relaxing some rules so that more people can qualify to take the shot. Why not just lift all regulations to increase the uptake? Anybody who wants a shot can do it right away. Why don't we just do that?
I think that will be the ideal situation. And of course, we should afford everyone in Hong Kong the vaccine. The government has procured 22 million plus doses of the vaccine. And if we have all of the vaccines in front of us, then we should just open it for everyone to receive the vaccine. But of course, we only have limited stock at the moment. So I guess the government will have to be selective on which group to give priority. I think when we first started, we actually, there was a proposal to allow the more elderly people to receive the vaccine. But we also know, that is primarily because we know that the elderly people are more at risk of mortality from the infection. But if we also look at the number of people who got infected or the percentage of people who are younger, say less than 65 years of age, we're talking about 80+% of these people. So there is a possibility that, in fact, besides protecting our elderly, we could also immunize our not so elderly,
right,
so that we can contain the spread of the virus to the elderly. So that's another strategy that maybe we can
when we talk
adopt.
about vaccines, right now, I think we've ordered 3 different types of vaccines, right?
Yes.
The Johnson & Johnson one is one shot.
Yes, but we haven't procured that one.
Should we?
Well, if it is available, and I don't have inside stories, but I assume that the government must be talking to various manufacturers, including Johnson & Johnson, for possible,
Now, there's a lot of talk about a vaccine passport, once you've taken a shot. Now, you said you've taken one shot already, right?
Yes.
So you've got some kind of government notice that said you've taken a shot, right?
Yes.
When you've taken 2 shots, I suppose they will give you some documents
yes,
to show that you've taken 2 shots. Now, a lot of other countries are saying, EU is discussing this. In the US, they're saying when people get vaccinated, they can travel freely around the country. So it's a kind of a vaccine passport. What I'm kind of wondering is, if we do the shots in Hong Kong, other countries may recognize the BioNTech vaccine because a lot of other countries have used that particular vaccine. But the Sinovac vaccine has not been approved yet by the WHO. So if you've taken the Sinovac one, can that be an effective vaccine passport? Because a lot of countries don't recognize that one.
Now, to be honest, I don't want to speculate yet. But all I know is that the Sinovac one has been submitted to the WHO for consideration to be included in the emergency listing. Hopefully, it will be evaluated soon, and hopefully we will know whether the WHO will enlist it. I think a vaccine passport is actually a very good idea.
Is that a good idea? I was going to ask you that.
So that we know that who has been immunized and who has at least some sort of protection against the vaccine, and most importantly, who will not hopefully pass on something to our own people.
But isn't that also a bit of a discrimination, Professor? Because if you've been immunized, then all right, then you can travel on a passport vaccine. But there are certain categories of people for health reasons cannot take it. And there are other categories of people who really don't want to take it. So does that mean they're banned from traveling?
Yeah. No, I think the important thing is I was going to say that, in fact, the passport thing is a good idea, but we must not actually first of all, we must not politicize it,
Right.
such that certain vaccines will only get recognized or accepted and others not. And secondly, we must also look after those who might not be able to receive the vaccine.
That's what I mean.
The most important thing, I think, is therefore the whole thing about vaccination. And that is, if these people cannot receive the vaccine, those who can should please take it, so that we will eventually achieve what we call herd immunity. Then everyone will be able to freely travel.
When do you think the world will reach herd immunity? I mean, I know it's a difficult question to answer because some countries will reach it, other countries won't.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about the developing countries not having enough. The wealthy countries have. So then you're going to have a situation that some countries can travel, like on the travel bubble, and other countries cannot, right? So you have a vaccine passport that, if, for example, in the United States, most of them have taken the vaccine. Hong Kong, we may reach that stage. Israel is almost there. So then you're going to have limited travel, right? When do you think that could actually even start, even limited travel?
Yes.
You think it could start very soon, like this year? Because people are dying to travel.
Hopefully, I think amongst various countries where the vaccination program is more advanced and more people have received the vaccine, and hopefully our politicians will be able to help us, negotiate with the other countries to allow us to travel. But you've actually raised a very important point and a very sad thing as well, and that is when we look at countries like Israel with almost 100% of people having received the first dose.
Right.
United States 20%, United Kingdom above 30-40%.
But not the developing countries.
Around the world, we're only talking about 2.6 of everyone.
So only 2.6% of the global population. But this is unevenly distributed.
This is very unevenly distributed.
Some have got 20%, some have got 30-40%, some have got almost 100%.
Yeah, or some have almost 100%.
So it's like not a solvable problem, right? It could take years before the world reaches 100%, right?
Hopefully we won't need 100%, but
80%.
definitely it will take a long time to reach the 60, 70, 80%, dependent on the infectivity of the virus. But majority of the people of the world to have received the vaccine.
Okay, I've got to end it now. Running out of time. See you next time. Good evening.